Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Excellencies, distinguished guests, welcome to this morning's session. I am Claire Davan. I will be moderating this panel this morning on the topic of regional economic integration and connectivity in Africa. And together we'll be exploring how physical connectivity is a prerequisite for trade connectivity with our three speakers that I'm going to be introducing. So we have Mrs. Nisreen Yuzi, who is the Director of Dakhla Atlantic Port Construction. Her expertise is about building critical, tangible infrastructure. With us, Mrs. Yuzi, you'll share your experience of the underground execution and long-term impact of this very specific mega project. We also have Mr. Abiola Osho, who's the Vice President of Investment for Africa Finance Corporation, who's based in Lagos, Nigeria, who's a financier and developer of African infrastructure with a focus on risk, bankability, and the strategic allocation of capital to de-risk and enable these large projects. And our third speaker is Mrs. Afaf Zarkik, who is with Itmar Capital. She represents a Moroccan sovereign fund with a strategic national mandate to invest for economic development. So before we dive in, I'd like to share, for background purposes and for our audience here, some information about the political context, political and economic context, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area. So this is a framework for transformation for the continent. Interestingly enough, this is a framework that is gathering 54 markets, small and fragmented at the moment. It represents about 1.3 billion people and consumers, and it gathers up to 3.4 trillion GDP combined. This creates a large protected market where African companies and businesses can sell finished products to other Africans, because as we know currently, Africa mainly exports raw materials such as oil, minerals, agricultural goods. And so the importance of this framework is that it makes Africa a much more compelling investment destination for building manufacturing hubs, what we'll be discussing today. And so another fact that I wanted to share about this to understand what's at stake is that according to World Bank estimates, this free trade area could lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty on the continent. It could boost Africa's income by $450 billion US, and it could also increase intra-African trade by over 80% by lowering the cost of doing business. And so we'll get to the heart of that today by exploring how physical connectivity is a prerequisite for trade connectivity that I just laid out a minute ago. So we'll start with Mrs. Nisreen Yuzi, who's the director of the Atlantic Dakhla Port Construction. So with you, Mrs. Yuzi, the Dakhla Atlantic Port in Morocco is often described as a future getaway for West Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's a catalyst for development in the country, but also beyond for the region?
Thank you, Claire, for this discussion and for this very interesting introduction to the panel. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers of this event, the MEDays and Amadeus Institute, and also Itmar Capital for this very important for us as a panel according to logistical corridors and how we can create growth by infrastructure. So I'm in charge of the supervision of the construction of Dakhla Atlantic Port, which is one of the very important ports and new generation ports that we are constructing in the Dakhla region. It's a big size ports and deep sea ports. As you said, what is important for us as an infrastructure is to have physical connectivity. But it's not just the first element to make connection, to have digital connectivity and also to have more than smart and green connectivity, because it's a whole equation to have integration for ports. So let's present the port of Dakhla Atlantic, which is one of the projects that's under construction and is the cornerstone of the royal vision for Sahel countries and for African connection and African integration in one part, and also in international level, it's also in a local level as an inclusive port, inclusive project for the milestone, also for the new model of development of southern provinces in Morocco. So we are roughly in half parts of our journey for construction of the ports, and we are seeking to have the first terminal under exploitation in 2029. It's a deep sea ports. In the smart and digital ports, as I said before in my introduction of my purpose of my speech, that having connectivity and having corridor and logistics is first of all having digital connectivity and smart connectivity. It's a 35 million ton of capacity of the ports, more than 80 meters as a depth. That can be more extensions for the ports. As civil engineers, when we were planning the port, we were seeking some international opportunities, and when the port of Dakhla Atlantic is one of the cornerstone of African integration, we are seeking to have more growth and to extend the layout of the port to be able to be a driver of different sectors in the area. So the 35 million ton is divided in different aspects of port traffics. We have in a bulk cargo and liquid cargo, e-fuels also, containers, shipyards also for reparation of ships, mainly for fishing industry, agriculture industry. So it's the first phase to have infrastructure to construct it. So describing the port in a technical or in a design level as the layout of the port, it's a port island. Located in 40 kilometers in the north of Dakhla city. So we decided to plan the port in these parts because Dakhla today, as you know, it's one of the best places in Morocco for tourism, for nautical sports, and we decided to build the port a way to respect the environment, to be environment friendly, and to construct a hub logistics and hub industrial in the north of Dakhla, which is 40 kilometers. It's not a port as a main goal. The goal is make the logistical ecosystem using and having a logistic and industrial zone which is near of the port, so the business model of the project is concentrated in a traffic which is mainly for integration of traffics also for the Sahel countries, for African countries, for making also African free trade. Maybe when we're gonna have discussion about finance, we're gonna more develop this point, which is very important for us to have this integration, African integration according to the infrastructure and to having the connection. So we're seeking in global markets as a port. It's new generation ports. It's not a first port, new generation port that we are constructing in Morocco. Morocco has already confirmed his as a maritime nation. We are in Tangier, and for sure everybody knows the success story of Tangier Med ports in transshipment containers, and right now we are working on another West Med port as a major port also for container and also for fuel bunkering. The new port of Safi was also one of the ports, specialized port in coal and in mining industry for phosphates in our continent, in our country and in continent in a higher level. Dakhla Atlantic Port is specific case, and the business model is specific mainly for creating growth by being the African gateway to the world. So as one of the most important maybe that I can say about Dakhla Atlantic Port is the location in Africa, because we are already named Atlantic, so we're in the Atlantic coast first, and also we have a position regarding the International Maritime Road, which is the east-west road that are going to the American markets, which is Latin American and the North of America, and also for renewable energy for Europe. So all these infrastructures, it's first also to align with our vision, our port policy. By 2030, we started our policy in 2012, and I remember very well when we was constructing different ports in Morocco, and we were talking about the Atlantic port, where we're gonna start the construction and we're gonna start the building. So thanks to all the ingredients and the international ingredients and also the demand forecast that we made for the Atlantic ports, that things are undergoing. And right now, question can be more developed about financing, about partnerships, about also skills also and competences that can work in the port in the future, and how we can make integration using the infrastructure. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much. Let's move to our second panelist this morning. So, Mr. Osho from the African Finance Corporation, the de-risking integration is a key issue in these large infrastructure projects. The AFC is known for tackling Africa's most challenging infrastructure gaps, or some of them. From your investment perspective, what are the most effective financial de-risk transnational projects, like the Casablanca-Dakar one or others that you have in mind, corridors that are crucial for integration and often stall at the financing stage? What is the crucial element there? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and good morning to everyone, and let me say it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting the Africa Finance Corporation. It's always a pleasure for us to be at gatherings like this and share our perspectives, but also learn from industry stakeholders. So on behalf of our CEO and the entire AFC, we're very pleased to be here, and thank you for having us. Before I come to your question, I think maybe I'll say a couple of things about the AFC and then lead into the question that you've asked. So we are a multilateral development finance institution, been around for about 18 years now, set up in Lagos, Nigeria, originally by the Nigerian government, with $1 billion of paid-in capital, with the singular mandate to bridge the infrastructure gap on the continent. With capital across different investment instruments. So we invest in different instruments, from senior debt to equity and everything in between as well. And we invest in about 6 major sectors actually. So we invest in power sector, anything from generation to transmission, including renewables as well. And we also do resources, so oil and gas, and mining, and then we do telecoms, technology, and industrials. Industrials is quite broad, anything that has to do with processing, so fertilizer, gas processing, refineries, and the likes. And then we do transport infrastructure and logistics, which is the sector that I work in and that I cover, which is quite broad. You know, within that space, we do any piece of infrastructure that is focused on moving people and resources from point A to point B. So ports, we have quite a huge exposure in ports across the continent. Special economic zones, we are a major shareholder in one of what is arguably Africa's largest special economic zone company today, called Arise IIP. We do roads, toll roads, aviation as well, maritime, and downstream oil and gas infrastructure. So that's really broadly what we cover. Apart from these core sectors, we also invest directly to sovereigns, and we also do project development, which I'll come to as I address the question that has been posed to me. So that's really the AFC. Balance sheet size today is close to $16 billion, investments in over 40 countries on the continent, with about 38 countries or so that are now member countries. So whereas the Nigerian government was the originator of the AFC, it is now fully diversified, and we have close to 40 countries that are now part of the AFC as member countries, and that includes Morocco as well. And a number of the countries are also shareholders. So we have quite a diverse shareholder base, and that allows us to be very flexible in how we look at investments. For us, when it comes to Africa, a couple of things are very clear, and the most fundamental thing is industrialization. It's really how does Africa move from being a producer and an exporter of raw materials to one that beneficiates the raw materials into semi-finished and finished products on the continent. And that is the core of who we are, what we represent. It's really at the center of all the investments we make, whether it's ports, whether it's a road, whether it's a refinery or a power plant. Everything has to speak to this fundamental theme of industrialization. And there are two pieces of this industrialization. There is import substitution, right, which allows us to be able to reduce the pressure on the local currencies by generating and producing more of what we need. And a good example is in the agriculture space, where Africa has, more than 60% of the world's arable land. But today, Africa's food import bill is more than $60 billion a year. So that's just not sustainable. There's nobody that can survive with such a lopsided mechanism. So how do we grow farmers? How do we grow agricultural capacity such that we can feed ourselves and reduce the need to source US dollars to import food? And that would help African currencies to grow and strengthen. So that's just an example of, import substitution side of things. The flip side of it is what we call generating competitive exports value chains. And this is the area where we, like I said, produce internally, generate internally, and then export either the excess of what we don't need or what we don't need. And I'll give you an example. In Nigeria, for example, Nigeria alongside Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana are one of the world's largest producers of cocoa. Cocoa is mostly, the end product of cocoa is chocolates. But Africa, or sub-Saharan Africa, isn't really a chocolate market. The average African just is looking for rice or wheat or bread just to survive the next day. So the large chocolate market is Europe and the US and the rest. So what we are doing now, we're working with a couple of players in Nigeria that have built capacity of processing cocoa into cocoa cake, cocoa butter, and then exporting that rather than exporting the raw cocoa. And what they're doing, they're generating dollars into the economy. And that is what we call an example of generating competitive export value chains. So if we industrialize, we can either substitute our imports or we generate competitive exports. And I think Morocco does that very well in the area of cars production, for example. So the many different countries that have specialty in different areas, and they're pioneering building things internally within the country and exporting. I'll give another example is Gabon. I mentioned earlier on that we are a shareholder in what is the largest special economic zone company in Africa today called Ariza IP. We started out Ariza IP in 2016, partnered with Olam, the Singaporean food company, to build out a zone in Gabon alongside the port, the mineral port. At the time, Gabon was, as many of you might know, Gabon is a heavily forested country. It's about 90% of forest, a very small country, but it's about 90% forest. And so they used to log their timber and just, export raw timber. What we did with that zone was we built a wood processing zone and crowded in different players who started to process the timber into veneer, into ultimately furniture in some cases, but they started to produce veneer and all the other intermediate products. And what that has done for Gabon is that it has moved Gabon from a 100% exporter of raw timber to a zero exporter of raw timber. So Gabon no longer exports raw timber. Exports out of Gabon now is either veneer or strips or wooden slips, or these days they actually not even producing furniture. And from the zone that we invested in Gabon, we have businesses that are actually exporting furniture to the US. And that has helped generate more tax income for the government. It has helped to reduce pressure on the local currency, generated jobs, direct and indirect jobs, and that's just an example. And that has been replicated in other countries like Togo and Benin, in other value chains, like cotton, for example. One of our zones in Togo now, they're producing actual, processing cotton into apparel and garments, and they've just signed a contract with an outfit called the Children's Place, where they now export those garments to. And Morocco is also very big when it comes to textile manufacturing and things like that. So those are examples of the kind of things we need to replicate. Now, if you look at these two avenues of opportunities, which is import substitution and exports, generating competitive exports, together, we've sized it at about $1 trillion of market size per year for Africa. And this is what Africa is leaving on the table. This is the type of value that Africa is leaving on the table. So when we talk about AFCFTA, trading more within ourselves, it's really about how do we generate import substitution, or how do we export raw materials. Now, to do all of this and do it effectively, of course, there are challenges that to really industrialize, to trade more within ourselves, to bring AFCFTA to life, we need to achieve three things. One, we need to debottleneck regulatory constraints, reduce trade barriers, improve connectivity of people. And that really is the foundation of solving the regulatory hurdle. Ability to move around the continent is very important, and this is something that I live every day, where I have missed important business meetings in Angola, for example, because I couldn't get a visa on time, and that's shocking. I'm going there for business meetings, I'm going there to generate opportunities, to evaluate investments, but I can't even get into the country in a timely manner. Nigeria and South Africa are two of the largest economies. Actually, top two, alongside Egypt. I think is always oscillating between the three of them, right? But for the average Nigerian to get a South African visa is so difficult, and vice versa. And so you wonder, if two of the top three economies cannot even enable the flow of people easily, then what are we talking about? Are we ready to trade within ourselves? Because it is people that generate opportunities. People have to be able to move freely, just the same way you have the Schengen region in Europe. And when people are moving, that's where the opportunities come from. The opportunities don't generate themselves. It is people. Yes, there's AI, there's technology, there's digital, but they're all controlled and originated and designed by people. So that's the starting point. For us, we try to advocate this visa. We're not going to say it's visa-free, but relaxation of visa hurdles across the continent. I'm not going to say Morocco, because it's very easy for me to get Morocco visa. I get it within a couple of hours, so that's fantastic. So those are examples of on the regulatory side. The second bit is on the power side. And I think North Africa is in a different league. Morocco, Egypt, I think is doing excellently well. This is really more in sub-Saharan Africa. I think Africa as a continent added, if I recall the number, maybe about 30 megawatts of power to its grid in 2024. India, just one country, added about 40 megawatts to its grid. So there's a lot of lopsidedness on the power side. And you need power to industrialize. We've done a lot of analysis where if you want to, for example, move, if I use Zambia as an example where there's the copper belt, Zambia, DRC. If you want to move from just mining copper concentrate and you want to smelt it into and eventually get into copper metal, you need 6-7 times the power that you need from the mining side. So those countries have to figure out how do we build competitive power generation at scale and that is cost reflective. And for us, the solution to that is to use our gas. So in AFC, we're not in the school of thought that Africa should abandon fossil fuels. We're doing everything. We invest in renewables at the same time as we're investing in fossil fuels because the industrialization need of Africa is enormous and you need power to enable that. And the resource that can generate that power at scale for us is our gas. So which is why projects like the Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, which has been, conceived and is being designed, they're very important. If we have gas in Nigeria, why can't it be brought all the way to the north and have arteries that are supplying it into different parts of the continent? So that's the second main challenge. And the third one is the interconnecting infrastructure. So we need to build more cross-border infrastructure. We need more rails across countries. We need more cross-border roads and all of that. And to make all of this happen, we then come down to the financing. I think the financing is where the question really is. But for us, before we talk of financing, we often advocate that we need leadership because leadership is what creates the vision and corrals people around that vision. And I think on the continent, we may have been lacking that sort of visionary leadership. We need that sort of visionary leadership in the key economies at the same time. So Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, DRC, Angola, Kenya, Morocco, 6-7 countries really account for majority of the activity on the continent. We need visionary leadership in those 6, Ethiopia as well. We need visionary leadership in those 6-7 countries to work together around a common goal at the same time in unison. I think that's what then makes capital to flow. So that's the first thing. But the leadership is not something we can solve. It's politics. It's a different ballgame entirely. But on the financing side, we advocate for continued focus on project preparation. It's very important. I think there's a lot of negligence, if I might use that word sometimes, in preparing projects for financing. And so which is why we have a project development team that looks at how do we deploy early stage risky capital to do all the studies that are required to make sure that the project is bankable. Beyond that, we need to look at how do we de-risk investments to crowd in international capital. It may surprise you, but we do see a lot of interest, from many countries who are keen to invest in Africa. So what we try to do is we try to de-risk it for them by putting our balance sheet in between the investment and the capital from those countries by providing some sort of guarantees. And we did that, for example, with Egypt. I can give an example of Egypt. About 3 years ago when Egypt was really having challenges with its macro fundamentals in terms of FX, it wanted to raise money from the global capital markets, and I think it was around 9 or 10% interest rates. And we provided some sort of counter guarantee for the bond investors. And with that, we were able to shave off about 400 bips in the pricing of that bond because the investors were not taking the direct risk of Egypt, we were taking AFC risk because AFC, we are the second highest rated financing institution in Africa at A3 by Moody's after the AFDB. So the AFDB is actually, I think we've fallen down to third now because it's AFDB on top. I think Badia is number 2, and then it's AFC. But we have an A3 rating, which is investment grade, and we use that to screen, provide guarantees to enable investments to flow. So that's one of the other things we need to do. And I'll wrap up shortly by also highlighting that we need to also increasingly look at blended financing. How do we get short-term commercial capital and blend it with longer-term patient capital from institutional investors and use that to sort of deliver projects? Because projects have different needs, and the different kinds of needs that projects have can't be met by one pool of capital. So we have to blend different types of capital together. And we did this, for example, in an investment that we did in Côte d'Ivoire, when Côte d'Ivoire needed to raise some money to refurbish its main refinery, which was run by SIER. So we provided some sort of short tenor facility. We led the entire financing. We structured some kind of short tenor financing for commercial lenders, but then we had a longer term financing for more patient lenders. But what we did was that we provided an out for the short term lenders, right? So we gave them a guarantee that after 5 or 7 years, we will refinance you. And that allowed us to be able to structure a 15-year facility, because then the shorter term lenders knew that they wouldn't stay in there for 15 years. They will be taken out by AFC, and then we'll replace the capital with other pools of capital at that time. And that investment went excellently well, actually was fully repaid last year. So there's a lot of success stories that we can build on. And I think AFC is an example of an institution that has shown that you can invest in Africa responsibly, sustainably, and profitably. In the 18 years we've been in operations, we have made profit every year, and we topped $1 billion of revenues last year, about $400 million of net income, and we have always paid dividends back to shareholders. So there's risks, but risks also bring opportunities. And I think what we need to do is embrace those opportunities and figure out how we mitigate them, but without shying away from taking the plunge. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get to our third speaker, but before, I just wanted to say we'll have time to reflect on what the other speakers have said in the next round of these questions. But just mentioning that now, if you want to prepare some questions for your co-panelists. And so our third speaker, Mrs. Afaf Zarkik from Itmar Capital. My question to you is about the gateway investment thesis. And more specifically, could you elaborate on the investment thesis that connects strengthening Morocco's domestic capabilities with advancing Africa's broader connectivity and development goals? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Davan. It's really an honor to share this panel with Mr. Osho from the AFC and Mrs. Youssi from Port of Dakhla. Before I start, let me just say that regional integration is a very important topic at Itmar Capital, and I'll give you more details about that later. But just to give you an overview of what we do, today around the world we have 3 families of sovereign wealth funds. We have the stabilization funds, we have the savings funds, and then we have what we call strategic development funds. And these models were the legacy of oil and gas producing countries who wanted to safeguard the economic have economic repercussions for future generations. And we see their genesis was in the Gulf countries, but also in Norway. And their models have evolved over the time to also include strategic development funds, which is where Itmar Capital sits. And Itmar Capital actually was launched in 2011, and at the time was called the Fonds National du Tourisme. And it was meant to accompany, at the time, the Moroccan strategy in tourism. But our mandate evolved to become a multi-sectoral fund. And today, we still invest in our legacy sector, tourism, but we are also open to other sectors, such as industrial manufacturing, as long as it's green. We also are interested in agro-manufacturing, and in the main priority needs to be that these sectors have to have large macroeconomic effect, especially job creation. But we have one exception, which is infrastructure. It doesn't produce many jobs, but it is an enabler of other sectors, such as industry. So this was just a little aparté about Itmar Capital. In terms of our relationship with the rest of African sovereign wealth funds, it is actually part of our DNA. Today, Itmar Capital is the chairman of an association that was initiated by us a couple of years ago in 2022, which is called the Africa Sovereign Investors Forum. Today we are 15 sovereign wealth funds across the continent, and the mission of our forum is to catalyze development finance toward our continent. The reason why we created this African forum, because there is another international forum of sovereign wealth fund, which Itmar Capital also chairs, but in Africa we believe that we have common challenges. Most importantly, today there is the debt crisis in Africa that hinders countries from investing in very important development sectors. And at the same time, we have an exploding demographic that we want to transform into a dividend and not a liability. And to do so, we believe, as Mr. Osho said, we need to act as catalyzers for private investors, but also foreign investors. And we also need to act as de-riskers in order to be able to attract that capital. I believe a lot has been said, but in order to jump back, I think Mrs. Yuzi covered corridors. Obviously, it's a very important part of regional integration, and I think Mr. Osho talked a lot about the importance of industrialization in order for African countries to move from being mere exporters of natural resources to becoming actually to create value through industrialization. But I believe a very important part of this equation, and I think Mr. Osho touched on this also, is electrification or access to energy. I think in this panel we all know the numbers in Africa. Maybe I can just share it with the public here today. We have a little less than 600 million people in Africa, so that's 500 million people in Africa that still don't have basic access to electricity. And in 28 countries in Africa, we have an access rate of less than 60%. Including some of the most populous countries, such as Ethiopia and Nigeria. And we also have 6 countries who are in what we call extreme level of inaccess, meaning that less than 20% of people have access to electricity. So how can we expect these countries to become industrialized if they don't even have basic access to electricity, let alone productive electricity? So that's why we put at the level of Itmar and at the level of ASIF also, we put electricity and energy at the height of our priorities. And we believe in Africa that energy integration is one of the most important levers of making electricity or energy bankable. And the reason why we need to make it bankable is because I think there needs to be a change of paradigm in the way we view things. If we look at foreign investments in Africa, I believe we needed to raise about 60 to 95 billion in order to reach our ODDs by 2030. In the last decade, we've only been able to raise 25 billion. So the gap is huge. Why is that? It's not that we are too risky. It's not that we are unable to access capital. It's because there is a lack of bankable projects. And we believe that today, with the right financial engineering, you can have access to all types of financing, debt or equity. And also, we believe that there are many instruments out there, but the secret or the crux lies in projects development. And that's where we want to, that's our kind of our agenda at the level of ASIF. We want sovereign wealth funds to play the role of market makers by bringing in that first level financing that will de-risk these projects and make it so that other foreign or private investors come into projects at later stage. That was basically my reflection around energy integration. I would like to add here the role of the AFCTA in this regard. The AFCTA is a very important lever because I think for three main reasons. The main reason is that it will enable integration at the level of market or regulation through I think what is called the Africa Single Electricity Market. That's number one. Number two is that is dispute resolution, because we've seen in the past that countries kind of, the bottleneck in regional integration, not that it doesn't exist, it does exist in Africa, but the bottleneck is is a problem of size and political leverage. So countries are hesitant to work with other countries that have larger size and more political leverage. And finally, I think the AFCTA will enable more renewables into our grid, because it is aligned with the Paris Agreement, with the Agenda 2030, and also with the Agenda 2063. So these are just my thoughts around these topics. Maybe we can expand on them later.
Thank you very much. So we had very, very rich presentations from our three speakers, and we have a bit of time, so we can dive into other questions. All of you touched upon the various issues that investment may face for large or not so large infrastructure projects in the region. And just to name four main of them, you mentioned the existing infrastructure deficit, political and bureaucratic hurdles, including tariffs and protectionism sometimes, or the slowness of implementation. We also talked about non-tariff barriers, such as red tapes across the region between countries. Visa can be one of them. And sometimes instability. So a question that I have, it's a general question, and feel free to answer the way you think is most relevant to your field, to your role in your organizations. What would be for you, we talked about all these issues, in terms of prioritization or next step or priority to further implement this framework, which is this free trade area. This, as Mr. Osho said, sort of Schengen area or equivalent, unifying all these economies, fragmented economies on the continent. What would be the immediate next step for you to really focus on in order to move forward in the implementation of this free trade area? Feel free to answer.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a really good question, and as I reflect on the question, I'm thinking, with all the things that we need to put in place, what should be the immediate next step. Um, and, the way I would look at it is based off of how we approach problems and challenges at the AFC. We're always inward looking. We're always looking at ourselves and asking, what can we do? How can we improve the situation? Because there's a lot of interface. Thank you. Because there's a lot of interface challenges. There's a lot of challenges that have to do with government, with leadership, and all of that. But beyond all of that, what can we control? What do we have control over? And for us, if I think about that question, I would look at it from that perspective of, okay, what can we control? What can we do today? And two things we are doing now more actively is to start to see ourselves as just beyond the financing institution, but as a real advocate, an advisor, a trusted advisor of the government. So we're now, taking a lot of steps, and a lot of our management and myself, my colleagues, we're always on the move. We're having several meetings with different governments and stakeholders, and trying to shape their thinking, trying to shape how they look at industrialization, how they look at projects, also contributing capacity where we can, because we're not government, so we can't do it ourselves, we can only help. Now, within that frame, the one thing that we are advocating for actively is how to make African capital work for Africa. And that's where this immediate next step will come from. We did an analysis recently, which we put out in what we call the State of Infrastructure Play report. It's a report that we do at the AFC every year, and it's available in the public domain. And in that report, we reported that there's easily about $4 trillion of capital within the continent. That's a lot of money. We talk about how Africa needs 25, 30 billion or 50 billion, depending on who you listen to, dollars of infrastructure intervention every year. And we go cap in hand to the West, to the global North all the time, IMF or World Bank, and looking for money, asking for support. But between Africa's pension funds, African sovereign wealth funds, money market instruments, there's about $4 trillion of capital. And this capital is, interestingly, being invested in short-term, potentially safe haven investment instruments in the global North. So it's basically powering, the economies of the UKs and the US and France. Why are we not bringing this capital into strategic infrastructure projects on the continent? And that's what our focus is on now. So we're heavily focused on, as I said, this next step is focused on what can we do. We're not, I can easily say the next step should be governments should make visa-free across the continent, but that will take a life of its own. Nobody has control over that. So we just focus on what we can control. And so that's really where a lot of our advocacy is coming from, is we need to put this $4 trillion into power projects in Africa, into rail, into ports, into roads, and we need to find the right mechanism to de-risk that capital coming in. And for that to happen, we need to create the regulation for that capital to be used for those purposes. That's a really big opportunity. It was really startling when we found that out from our research that we have that much money that is lying in wait and is potentially even powering the economies of the global North. So we need to improve the capacity of African financial institutions and keep the money on the continent. All right, there's so many businesses and so many governments that have their treasury accounts sitting in France or sitting in London or sitting in New York. So we need to bring that money back into the continent. That's the one hand. And the second thing is we use given that we're a financier, it's an area we have a lot of influence, and we're wielding that influence, and we're starting to see some results. Now, that's on the one hand. The flip side of it, again, still within the financing frame, is as we do that, we continue to be clear about the value proposition of investing in Africa to the international investors. Because there's a lot of capital. I mean, if you check Saudi sovereign wealth fund, Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, it's trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital, and they're looking for where to put the money. And they are interested in Africa, but they don't understand the climate well enough. And that is where people like us come in. Because we've been doing business in Africa. I talked about the guarantee product, so we increasingly are using that more and more. And we hope that the government plays its part, because if we continue to fund these projects and the government plays its part, then you start to see the AFCFTA come alive. But in attracting that international capital, we have to be clear about the deployment strategy. And this is one thing we've done with a new subsidiary we set up, which we call AFC Capital. It's a fund that basically was set up to try and attract capital from the international investors to be put into what we call climate resilient projects in Africa. We realized that we couldn't do that directly on our balance sheet. So we've been able to, we're about to close that fund. It's going to close at about $500 to $600 million first close. And we were very clear about what the money will be used for and how it's going to add value to the communities and to the people and to the countries involved. And the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, based in Korea, actually are the seed investor in that fund with $250 million closed and disbursed. So we can get more money from the international, pool of investors, but we have to be clear about how the money will be used, and we have to develop the right programs to deploy that capital. That on the one hand, and then on the other hand, getting this $4 trillion to work for the continent, I think a combination of those two will be quite a powerful force that can really start to transform, the AFCFTA idea into an actionable intervention that is actually delivering value to the continent.
Thank you very much. What about you, Mrs. Yusi? What do you see as potentially an imminent next step that could be taken to further push for this free trade area to really be implemented effectively?
I will maybe interact with some insights that was shared with the same purpose, which is African integration, how we can make free trade the ports and the infrastructure or logistic warehouses, logistics, industrial, is one of the tools for making trade all over the world. But in my perspective, there's three challenges that we have to tackle to make trade and to keep the growth, African growth. The first one is the massive infrastructure gap. We have in Africa a massive infrastructure gap to go beyond. So it's not a matter of bankable projects. It's a matter for taking risks in constructing infrastructure, and no single country can finance Africa's integration alone. So if we need to make a cross-border vision, is by implementing new solution of alternative financing projects. And when we are talking about ports or rails or roads, roughly more than $100 billion that we need in Africa to invest, to construct infrastructure, to be able to make the growth, to be able to have those, to be able to be connected to global markets. So why I'm talking about this? Because for me, it's the base. The base of growth is to have infrastructures and to be able to be attractive in international level and to be able to unlock the opportunities that we have in Africa, the potentiality that we have to unlock this energy and to go to the, if I have just one sentence to talk and to share with all the audience that are here, is that to go to the fast mode. We are working and we are planning projects and we're investing projects in a changing world. And the world is changing very quickly using every, sure, when I'm talking about physically, sure, I have to talk about digital because a smart infrastructure is also connectivity with people. This is to go in fast. And for Africa, we already take the time to make the shape, to make some statistics, to know how we can work, how we can do this. Right now, we have to go to the fast track and to go really for execution of projects. And sure, I will talk about the royal vision of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI for the landlocked countries, which are the Sahel countries. This is the African joint venture as a model, as an initiative to work together, to be able also to enhance the competitiveness of African countries and to be connected to global markets. We're not talking about sharing markets. We are talking about creating the new markets and connecting African markets to global markets. You talk about cocoa, you talk about chocolate. Maybe you will not need chocolate today, but in international level, we need also to make more added value in different industry. All those things, it's beyond talking about added value and exporting, not exporting raw materials, but exporting added value and industrial material for creating jobs and creating activities and creating more taxes for the states and creating more jobs. More economic and social growth in the country, this is a main goal for sure, but projects has to be for sure inclusive and to make population living better in their life and also to having jobs and to stick in their countries to make more work. But what is more important in my perspective and my point of view is making like integrated financial institutions to work together and to see how we can make a vision like Sahel countries or also the states, Atlantic states, which are sharing the same ocean and we are working the same markets and we can work together to be more competitive in the international level. So if Morocco right now we are spending and we spend already more than our port strategy cost $85 billion, and we already spent $55 billion for port, for infrastructures, and more investments was already also done for road, for railway, with all the vision in the infrastructures and in the PIDA with the African Union, that all countries need to invest in the infrastructure first and to be more attractive for partnership, PPP, sure, because we need private investments. When we talk about private investment, for sure, we talk about sovereign funds, we talk about bankable projects. So this is the second part for me, for us. In Dakhla Atlantic Port, we already put the vision and we took the risk to invest in a huge infrastructure to construct it and to be attractive. And this is, for me, it's a very success story because right now we since we started the construction of the ports, we are discussing right now in how we can exploit the ports, what about private sectors, how we can work. It's a landlord ports in our system, in our port system, so the construction is can be a public fund or also can be also a public fund using another international funds like IFC or the African Bank Development or different systems. What will I say maybe to resume is the massive infrastructure gap is the main challenge right now to have to seek and to have to go beyond and to go and to start to execution. Maybe I'm talking as a port constructor, so I have this energy to go beyond that, to go to the concrete blocks and to come to construct the port or the infrastructure in general, not just the ports. The ports, it's just a passage. It's a way to go to connect with other countries, to connect with other global countries, and to connect with the new opportunities in international level. The second point is the weak corridors. Today, that's why I say that no single country can do integration by itself. We have to do it in a regional vision, in a regional cooperation. So weak corridors and the connection between countries, it's a very bad thing to be competitive in the international level. We need to work together, so in that time we can have the cost, less cost means that we can be competitive and all international markets can be connected to us. And the third challenge for me, as the second step that we have to go through, is the digital divide. Today, we have a huge gap also in Africa to be all of us connected. As you said, as I said, for the ports, we are almost connected with the international level because we have a port route. We're going to receive international ships that are going to come to drop off manufacturers and different. It's already connected as port community systems, single window also to implement for international trade. So this problem of digital divide is one also of the problems that we have to tackle. When I talk about three challenges, as I say, to go to the fast model to unlock energies is to work in the three parts in the same time to be able to create growth, to be able to work together, to be able also to make stability in Africa. Because despite that we're having some disputes or some problems or some social problems in a country, we're going to work together to share opportunities, to share something positive that you can find, something that can be interested for sharing experience or work with me, and at the same time. So creating atmosphere, creating a communion environment between countries, it's creating stability also and creating a reason to strengthen this stability because we are working together and we are making growth and we are growing together, which is the main idea of African integration.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it to Mrs. Afaf Zarkik to reflect on what was shared by the two other panelists before we can get to questions from the audience. Please take your time.
Again, I think a lot has been said, and it's very interesting. Maybe I can just add one single thought. At the level of ITMAR and also at the level of ASIF, what we've noticed is that when we speak with a coordinated voice, the system starts to shift. And I'll just give you an example of something that happened very recently. We were invited to Côte d'Ivoire by the AFDB president to align on the development agenda in Africa and how we see things and how they see things. And basically, Dr. Sidi Oulta, the president of the AFDB, has this very high level vision of where he wants to see Africa, and these very high level ambitions with extremely big macroeconomic effects, including the reform of the financial act, which he calls his 4 cardinal points. And I think they include very sophisticated ideas of the reform of the financial architecture in Africa, how to utilize the demographic dividends, as I said before. Enhanced access to capital is one of his 4 pillars. And I think the last one was green infrastructure. So you can see how we both align on these things. And the object of the meeting was, first of all, from our side, to congratulate the president for his new appointment, and then to exchange our points of views and so on. But it was also a working group. So we were sitting there, and he was like, "What do you need?" And we were telling him, "Mr. President, we have trouble finding financing for project development." And he was like, "Okay, you got it." And then we said, "We have trouble with currency risk." "Okay, you got it." "We have trouble with the knowledge exchange." "I can help with that." And so this is how it went. And then at the very end, we were recent investment platform that was launched in June 2025 with the rest of the African sovereign investors, which we call the Africa Sovereign Investments Forum Investments Platform. And this investment platform's idea is that we can pool not only capital, but also projects from different sovereign wealth funds in different countries, and that way we can create the right size and the right conditions to attract foreign capital at an increasingly more important scale. And we chose 3 priority areas, which today have been proved to be market-proof. We know that the market today is very uncertain with the return of protectionism and mercantilism. So, we don't have that much development aid anymore, as Mr. Osho said, so we need to think to bring African solutions to African problems. And these areas that are market-proof and where we are going to invest through the ASIF platform is, first of all, energy, second of all, logistics and corridors, and finally, digital infrastructure. This was just to give you an idea of how we see things and how we are moving forward through partnerships and cooperation.
Thank you so much. I just want to be mindful of the time. We have 15 minutes left. So I'll invite our audience here to raise questions or share some thoughts. And we must have a microphone somewhere. No question? Okay, thank you.
Hello, so my question is, how can we guarantee that the financing of these programs isn't met with, how can I best call it, because most of the times when financing comes to Africa, the big problem is where the money goes. Sometimes it doesn't go directly to the fund, sometimes it goes to politicians. So how can we best guarantee that this money is used in the best way possible? Are there any plans, any initiatives going in this time to better ensure this good processing of the funds so that the money goes where it's supposed to go? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question while we're at it? Well, I guess to answer that question, there are different point of view. There's the point of view of governments, and then there's point of view of private sector investments. And of course, they do their due diligence to ensure that capital is invested properly. And but I'll leave you to respond if you want.
No, I think you said it very nicely. We are more private sector focused, and the way we deploy capital is to do a lot of work, a lot of due diligence. Project has to be the right project. I've spoken about from a strategic perspective. It always starts from that overarching point of view. It has to be a project that is speaking to industrialization. Whatever the project is, every project can be connected to industrialization one way or the other. So even though we still, for example, and I'll give an example, even though we still do oil and gas upstream, today we wouldn't fund an oil and gas production if it's just to and all of that. And if there's an associated energy requirement, we would also fund that. So we're using what we call an ecosystem mindset or an ecosystem approach to making investments, where we take one project and we follow it through every part of the chain to ensure that and I think we're able to do this because we're fairly unique in a sense. The array of sectors that we can invest in, I mentioned earlier on, but also the array of products that we can deploy. So I would say we're probably fortunate in the sense that we can do all kinds of instruments. We have equity investments, we have debt. Have a broad range of instruments we can deploy. When we come into a project, we're not looking at just that project. So when you're talking, for example, to me about, this solar project, I'm listening, but I'm connecting it to all the other ancillary projects around it. So when we come up with a proposal or a solution, it is end-to-end, right? It is connecting that singular project that you may have come with to other things that we are working on, or to other things that is in our pipeline. So that's what we call the ecosystem mindset. So for us, we are very clear-eyed about where we want to put our money, and how we put it in is a function of our due diligence and the project structuring, and how we negotiate all the different protections, and we follow the money as well. So we are a very active investor. We're not passive at all. All our investments were very active on the board, active in management. We make sure that we are helping our investee companies to benefit from the broader pipeline and the broader portfolio that we have. So we will connect, for example, an investee company in one of our zones to a project we invested in for petroleum logistics to supply them. So we do all of those connects, and by doing that is the only way to create value. If we look at investments in isolation, it becomes very hard to deliver the value that Africa needs. So that's really how we look at it. And then from the governance, public sector perspective, I'll leave that to the politicians to just focus on my specialty and my expertise. Yeah, thank you.
Any other thought from our panelists on this question?
Maybe I will interact with this question, which is very interesting for port construction. Also, as a port engineers, we are working on optimization of the infrastructure. So, and we are trying to make the balance of the good quality according to highest standards of port design, and at the same time, how we can make the cost of infrastructures the less we can. So the optimization and different technical studies that we are making in this type. We are in the concept of being economic and also ecologic. So for us, and also maybe I'm going to share with some young professionals some insights about how we can make infrastructure more of resilience and friendly in environment level, and also it's one of the types the being environment level friendly environment is not. It doesn't mean that being costly. Sometimes we in the Dakhla port and construction, so we are seeking that we will work with less tracks, more maritime ships, mainly for constructing the dike and protecting that moving materials. So it was one of the main issues in the work sites to make the project less costly in a matter of budget, for sure, and also in a matter of environmental activities that you're working on. We're working on circular vision, also circular way of execution of the project of the port. So we are trying to use the same materials between and make the balance between land reclamation for the ports, for the future terminals, and the dredging. So in a matter to be less costly and more environmental friendly, and also to adapt to the local materials in the region. And in our specification to the contracts, to the private contractors, it was one of the main issues that we are very strict about it, is to use the local materials and to use the local also energy and to construct the ports. So we're gonna make it less costly and more friendly.
Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. So thank you for the different presentation. My name is Dimuya Palai. So I have a question. Previously, Mr. also say that it's important to invest and to keep the money in our continent. So my question is, how we can do that to invest and to keep the money in our continent? How the process? Like, this is my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that will be our last question. Thank you.
Yeah, she said it's a large question, so I'll take a part of it. You know, it's making sure that we keep the type that includes Africa and Africans, and that happens when we are processing on the continent. Because if we process on the continent, we, you know, increase the jobs, we build capacity. I think ports of Tangier, ports of Dakar, and the rest would not have developed this much and be executing an $85 billion port program if they had not built the bench and the capacity to execute and deliver on those programs. And so where there isn't a lot of capacity, we recognize that we need to bring in foreign partners, but we always advise government, it's very important to have local laws that protect the people in dealing with foreign partners, right? You have to make sure that, you know, communities are protected, their avenue to hire the people within the country into the jobs they can do, and there are provisions to train people within the country as well. And we have some good examples. If you look at, for example, I used to work at Shell before I joined the FC. Shell, Shell in Nigeria, right? The level of talent that has developed in Nigeria's oil and gas sector is because the government found a way to hold Shell when it first came into the country in the 1950s to ensuring that it was developing the people. Today, Nigeria is a huge source of export of oil and gas talent within Africa. If you go to Angola, you go to Cameroon, Congo, and the other, Ghana, a lot of the other oil and gas countries in Africa, you see a lot of Nigerian expatriates, right? And that's because capacity has been built over the years. There's so many people that Shell has developed, Chevron and the rest of them, to the point that even Nigerians can execute a deep water oil and gas project. Before, you needed the experts from Netherlands to come, you know. So it is gradual, but the way we do it is not overnight. It will not happen overnight, but it's to be focused and ruthlessly consistent with the programs that ensure that we are building on that capacity, and that includes a lot of things. It's a bit of a broad response, but the details is really in execution. The details is in project by project, what we're doing, what we're holding the foreign counterparties to, and how we're ensuring that we're creating the enabling environment for those projects to be executed in the right frame. That way we keep the jobs, we build our people, we keep the capital flow, and that's purely from a project execution perspective. But from a financing perspective, what we need in the immediate, which we are working on with a number of governments, is to relax some of the stringent rules and laws around what pension funds can invest in, for example, and ensure that we put in some critical infrastructure in there, because a lot of countries have rules that, which is okay, which is right, that govern, you know, what pension funds or sovereign wealth funds can invest in, and that tends to be limited. So we need to expand that. But you're not just also going to expand it, you have to expand it and give comfort that the money will not be lost, which goes back to the issue of the guarantees and using aids to protect that capital, which I talked about. So it's a two-pronged approach that we need to follow to achieve that in the medium to long term.
Thank you. I think our session is coming to a close, so I want to thank our panelists, Mrs. Yussi, Mrs. Zarkic, and Mr. Oisho for your very rich contributions to this conversation, and also want to thank the organizer at MEDays for inviting us and bringing us together to have this conversation. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our audience for attending.